Welcome to 0 to 80% Faster, How to Leverage AI to Accelerate Security Reviews. I'm on the Trust Cloud team. I'm going to be your host for this session. So before we dive into the agenda, I want to tell you a little bit about Trust Cloud. Our platform allows you to pass security reviews and answer security questionnaires up to 80% faster. You can publicly showcase your company's security posture with our Trust Portal tool to cut down on the number of security questionnaires that customers send you. And for the questionnaires you do receive, our proprietary generative AI tool can accurately pre-fill up to 90% of your responses for you. Finally, you can prove the impact of your efforts on revenue to your leadership team with our ready-made dashboards. Now let's take a look at our agenda. First, we're going to look at what companies have to lose by dealing with lengthy security reviews. Next, we'll explore some ways to speed up the process, paying special attention to AI tools and the pros and cons they have to offer. We'll wrap up our session with Q&A at the very end. Speaking of Q&A, please feel free to submit any questions you have through the Q&A function in Zoom throughout the presentation, and we'll try our best to respond to them. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our panel of experts. Richa, if you could kick us off, that would be awesome.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking out the time from your day and joining us on this webinar today. My name is Richa. I'm going to be the moderator. And the reason I get to be the moderator is because I felt this pain acutely in my previous experience, being part of the security reviews, figuring out the answers, working with different teams, project managing the whole thing, as well as get the pressure from my security and my CISOs to make sure that we are answering accurately and in a timely manner as well. So that's my experience, and I'm really excited to hear from our panel of experts today. And with that, John, I will pass it on to you for your introduction.
Hey, John Zajac here. I'm customer security assurance for Cribble. I'm responsible for all of our security questionnaires, managing the Trust Portal within Trust Cloud, and any general security tasks around sales.
Hi, I'm Tejas. I'm the Chief Product Officer of Trust Cloud. And over the last 5 years or so, my objective has been, how do we get out of this habit of having to answer 300 to 500 questions in a security questionnaire manually. And so in my ideal world, we are using a combination of AI and APIs to get rid of this entire problem space where we have to do this manually. And so that's why I'm here.
Melissa, you're on mute.
So sorry. I'm Melissa, Director of GRC at Trust Cloud. I'm responsible for our internal compliance, and I've also, previous organizations, been responsible for managing the completion of questionnaires and working with the team to complete them in a timely manner. So close to my heart here.
Nice. I love that. Moving on to the next slide, I know one of the things that we want to start talking about is the opportunity cost of security reviews. And it essentially means, what are you not able to get done while you're spending so much time on security reviews, and how do you keep track of all of those commitments? So Melissa, since you said that this is something that's very close, a pain very close to your heart, just tell me a little bit about your experience in the past dealing with security reviews.
Yeah, I worked on a team where we would be kind of the endpoint, or where questionnaires would come in for the organization. I worked on the security team, also doing GRC work on that team. And a lot of times, we would be responsible for the completion, and these questionnaires were super important to our organization. It had a huge impact on revenue. And so it was always a top priority, but a lot of times the way that the questionnaires were structured, it wasn't all of my team's responsibility to kind of have the answers to these questions. And so we ended up being more of project managers, kind of coordinating and answering and having meetings and doing a lot of things that took time away from looking at security alerts and doing security improvement projects. And so it took away from projects, but also I see there's the lower morale here on the slide. I feel like a lot of security professionals would much prefer working on improvements and fun projects that they enjoy rather than filling out these questionnaires.
Yeah, are you telling me, Melissa, that you never wanted as a kid just grow up and answer security questionnaires.
No, Especially
All
not
right,
this
John.
and said in different ways, you know?
That's true. That's true. John, I know you have been in the trenches to do these things in various different companies. What would you like? What would you talk about the opportunity cost when it comes to manually completing these repeatedly over and over again?
Well, I think it's huge. I think if you could take that time down to, I would say before we brought in Trust Cloud, it was probably, weeks to complete these things. And when you're in a sales cycle, security is often an afterthought. So you're not given weeks to do that. You're given a day or two or 5 days to do it. So, and you've got 100 salespeople sending you, 30 questionnaires at the end of a quarter. Having an automated repeatable process narrows that window and increases the likelihood of a sales closure on time rather than delaying and pushing that opportunity to another quarter.
And I completely relate. I'm sure by the time it comes to your desk, you're already behind the SLA because sales wanted it as of yesterday. So I can hear like you have to execute on these pretty quickly.
We're already behind.
They just,
We're
in
already
your
behind.
experience
Oh,
working,
get it? Sorry.
yeah, it's already, they had to come up to you. That's already behind. They just, your experience in your previous roles, completing this manually to what and why we designed it now, again, to solve for that opportunity cost.
Yeah, I think John hit on a good point, which is we all want to be contributors to helping the company earn revenue. And so the motivation for all of us to do this is I'm helping the company grow. And as a result, I understand why this is an essential part of the deal cycle. The challenge is that typically it's extremely hard for most teams to have knowledge that is shared well enough within the team to where this can be a task that can be easily distributed or automated. Because usually it happens to be one or two people or a few subject matter experts that know the right answers. And unfortunately, in most organizations I've been part of or worked in, there are very few people who even know what is the right way or what is the recommended way to fill out a security questionnaire. And so the objective for us when we started thinking about this problem was a lot of security questionnaires look and sound the same. They're asking essentially the same things, but they're asking them in different ways. And this is a problem that is ideal for ML and NLP and AI to figure out, hey, can I actually understand what a security questionnaire is asking and then create the best possible answer from my repository of information to try and articulate my response. And so that was the problem we started out with 5 years ago. And over the last 3 or 4 years, both the advances in ML as well as what we've been able to do by training our internal models and now with GPT has made this problem a lot easier to solve. So you're seeing more and more people trying to solve it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think that brings us to the next segue too, because answering questionnaire faster is something that everybody wants, with less time, with less manual effort. What are the kind of ways that you were trying to operationalize this in your previous organizations, John? Like, it was a very manual maintenance of your knowledge base. Was it something like a trust portal or a trust page within your website? Like what you've seen the industry go through this transition. How have you seen this evolution take place?
Yeah, I would say way back when, about 10 years ago, we were just using spreadsheets and kind of some manual processes to manage that data, and then you had to merge sheets to get accurate information, and you were actually having more inaccurate information than accurate because as the product evolved, you weren't able to change in all the right spots. So evolving from that into some homemade knowledge bases into a product like Trust Cloud really increases the capability to answer and get these out the door quicker, and having that trust portal really makes things even easier, because sometimes you can satisfy the need with just the documentation and the portal information, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where we have seen a huge rise in the trust portals as well, to just limit the number of questionnaires to come to you in the first place. Melissa, again, going back to your experiences, portal without trust portal, and us as well as like manually maintaining it, and again the risk of giving out inaccurate answers because your business and your tech stack changes so rapidly within the organization that the answer that you gave 3 months ago might not be consistent. So how were you juggling those kind of competing priorities?
Yeah, I think it's really, really hard to juggle them because you're kind of faced with should I spend more time just doing these questionnaires and doing the whole kind of process, or do I spend more time maintaining the knowledge base, knowing that I'm still probably going to also have to like project manage the questionnaire as well. So it kind of came to like, how much time do we have to spend and where is the time best spent? We tried doing a knowledge base, and very quickly it became outdated. I was at a kind of a smaller, fast-growing company, and we were changing things, pretty quickly. And when you start putting in all of the questions you've ever received, that list of questions gets very, very long, and it is super tedious to go in and there's only so much like control find can do to help you update those Excel sheets. So it kind of, we built it and then kind of ignored it and started just going back to let's just fill out the questionnaire.
Yeah, it's so much like bad data is not going to help, and then so many flavors of the same answer is not going to help too. So you're still taking on that liability. I know there's a conversation around AI, and there's so many limitations. Last couple of years, AI has become mainstream, and a lot of companies are also trying to develop like their own DIY AI models to help with this. They just want to hear your thoughts on what are the kind of competing priorities, and we can go to the next slide too, Aaron, when it comes to the DIY AI models.
Yeah, this is a comic strip I really like, because one of the most frequent questions I get nowadays is, well, can't we just get GPT to answer for it? Can we just not feed all the questions to GPT and give the answers that GPT gave? And I often use this anecdote, but I also use, to think about it, there are really three axes that every security review team is balancing. The first axis is the speed. Like my sales team needs this quickly. How quickly can I get this out to them? So I want it to be fast. The second one is the quality of the answers. I want my customer to be satisfied with the answers I give them. So it's really important that I don't get follow-ups and go into this long cycle of back and forth. So the second axis is quality. And if you think about it, the third axis is accuracy. Am I actually answering with the truth? And what is the liability I'm taking on by the answers I'm giving? If I misrepresent my company's security posture, what is the risk? And often if you ask security folks or legal, they will get really, really sensitive, as they should, about what are we actually telling our customers that we do, and are we actually doing it? Who's responsible for what is said? And as we've been sort of exploring different AI models over the last few years, what's clear is there's a lot of benefit to using things like GPT, which are great in the first two axes. They're great at speed, and they're great at the verbosity of an answer. What they need to be supplemented with is something that can ensure accuracy. Because one of the drawbacks of using a generative model is, by definition, it generates things. And in the space we are in, generating or hallucinating new ideas isn't necessarily the objective. And so generating things is great if you're writing a blog post, but it may not be the right thing if you're sending somebody a commitment that you're doing certain things. And so a lot of the work we are doing in my team is focused on how do we use the best of generative technology, but also how do we supplement it with citation-based accurate answering, so that we actually can prove that what is being generated comes from a source of truth, and it can be proven to be accurate.
Yeah, that definitely brings a whole lot of questions, because if you think about it, the AI whitewashing thing is real. There's so many tools in the market. ChatGPT has become very synonym with AI too. So as people are looking to get some AI-powered workflows to help with this mundane task of answering questions, it's mundane, but it's very high requirement from a legal perspective and a security perspective, to your point, to be accurate. What should they be looking at when it comes to developing AI or finding tools that have AI when it comes to helping them with the specific use case? So I know, John, like you've, again, gone through multiple of these rounds of questions and evaluating other tools. Like, what are you looking when you're looking at these AI tools to ensure they can be speed, provide the accuracy, and still a very customer-friendly answer? So to limit that back and forth in this process.
Well, I think it's important, first of all, to make sure that whatever you're feeding into the tool is accurate, right? And not too lengthy, but then you're looking for a product that can act on that accuracy, right? Feed me something back that I use and that I can consider accurate and not have to review every single response, right? Because if you're reviewing every single response because you're not trusting the AI, then you're spending as much time as you were without that AI piece. So to me, it's about the accuracy. It's got to be accurate, and it's got to be responsive, and it's got to understand the questions that are being asked. And I think Tej said something earlier about 90% of these questions are a regurgitation of a previous question in some way, shape, or form. So it's got to understand that question and then take that answer and make it accurate to that question.
Yeah, perfect. And then Melissa, what's your thoughts on like minimal knowledge base maintenance? Like, it sounds very good. How would you go about doing this? Because that's where you have so many different flavors of the same answer creep up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you go through in your regular course of business and you kind of collect all of these different questionnaires that you have performed. But then one thing that we did do in the past is kind of use one of the kind of more standard questionnaires, like a SIG Lite, and we would try to kind of talk to our vendors and say, like, maybe we can use something like this first. And I think that that using some of those more standard questionnaires can kind of maybe hold off on the very unique questionnaires because you've already filled out a very robust one. But also it is, a robust set of questions that can be fed into an AI model. And I think it relates to a lot of the different unique questions that you might get from any vendor.
Makes sense, yeah. But there's so much conversation and consensus building if you want them to take one of your existing SIGs or the cakes, right? Like, that probably process took you 2-3 calls to get them to convince to use this as is.
It doesn't work very often.
Yeah. I think it's one of those, like, which pill is harder to swallow? Should I convince them on this, or just give me your question and I'll fill it out?
Yeah.
There's also this whole term when it comes to like the safety, the privacy. This another term that I learned within the AI world, like hallucination free. Like, how do you effectively implement those kind of stuff when it comes to having various different kind of AI models in your toolkit? And Tejas, I'll address this one to you.
Yeah, I mean, this is also something that everybody that I'm talking to is trying to figure out what are the right questions to ask about governance of AI models. I think we are all in the zone right now where AI models are going to become pervasive, and you're going to see them everywhere. And particularly regulated businesses, people in healthcare, in security, in fintech. If you work with companies in these spaces, they are thinking through, they're setting up internal governance committees around what is the right way to ask vendors about the governance of their AI models. And therefore, there's also a bit of skepticism. There has been a lot of progress coming out of organizations like NIST and ISO on frameworks around how AI models should be governed. So where does the data go? Who has access to it? What data is used for training? Whether there are shared models or bespoke models for each customer. So there's now a standard that ISO has created. It's called ISO 42001. which is their framework around how any company that is using AI should be governing their use of AI. And at Trust Cloud, what we did is as soon as that standard came out, we aligned ourselves to that and said we will actually implement all of the controls that are intended in the ISO 42001. And similarly, NIST has one called NIST AI RMF, which is their risk management framework around AI. So I see that there's a lot happening in this area where the questions are getting less and less subjective. And I think what you'll see is now independent auditors also coming in and auditing companies that have AI in their platforms. And we saw the first evidence of a company that we work with that was audited for ISO 42001 because their entire platform is built on AI. And so that's what's starting to happen. And more, I think buyers of software will start asking for those things.
I could say from my experience at Trust Cloud that we have received a couple of those questionnaires regarding AI that we were able to solve and answer because we had those AI frameworks, something that we are adhering to, because obviously we take the safety and privacy of the data as well as our AI guidelines pretty seriously here as well. Going back to you, John, I know we were talking a little bit about the processing time, but how have you evolved with the kind of security reviews that you are doing previously without Trust Cloud and now with Trust Cloud to be able to show to your business how you are helping with this hustle of answering these security questionnaires? So how are you able to connect that? Yes, we are processing time. This is how I'm adding value through these many questions and things like that.
Yeah, again, prior to implementing a tool, I think there was a manual process that was passed around like a hot potato. So it was managed by 7 or 8 different people who also had day jobs, right? So not only have we been able to take that process from, a week to 10 days down to 2 or 3 days, but we've also freed up those people as a smaller company, freed up those people so that they can actually do their day jobs. And there's recognition around that all the time about, hey, this is great. Able to work on, working with customers or working on a fix in AWS or wherever it might be. And they're not having to stop and say, all right, I know where this answer is. Let me go find it. It's a simple process of uploading, getting the answers pre-filled, reviewing a little bit, and then modifying the knowledge base as you go. So it's definitely taken us from probably a 7 to 10 day down to a 2 to 3 day process, which has been a massive improvement for our sales and our sales support team.
Yeah, and I bet that also helps with the team morale, right? Nobody wants to be bogged down answering the questionnaire, so that's the other joy that you get out of this.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, and when we're talking about these AI models, there's also this notion of like being able to positive reinforcement and provide the negative reinforcement, so it becomes more fine-tuned as you continue using it. Have you seen something like that, Melissa, as you continue to evolve with the AI tools in modern day and also like in the security answering flow?
Yeah, and I from your question, you're talking about the learning, right, of the questions. Yeah, I definitely think that as you go through and can say, maybe this answer is not, exactly what I was looking for. That's like the input you're putting in, it creates like dividends in the future, and then you're never having to kind of go through and review that again. You've explained to the learning what your answer is, and that will be the answer in the future.
Yeah. There is also this notion, because you are leveraging technology here as you're answering so many of these questions, the improvement is not only just in the AI being able to answer this accurately the next time it sees questions, but there's also improvement in insights to say, hey, your customers are asking you about these things. This is how you should start making recommendations in your control program to further enhance that. Is that something that you have seen around in the industry, Tejas, or something that you have thought about when it comes to Trust Cloud?
Yeah, and I'd love to get John's take on this as well, because one of the things I've heard a lot about is that the struggle for security teams is to tie what is happening in the sales side into what is the effort being put on the compliance and security side. To say, if I do these sets of activities, it is going to have a material impact on sales. So for example, a lot of our customers are asking us for GDPR type attestations. And if we pursued GDPR formally, we'd be able to open up a lot more customers in Europe and be able to close these deals much faster. That correlation is really hard for a lot of security teams today, because these two exist in separate worlds a lot of the time. Is what I need to reduce a certain risk or implement a certain control or build a certain policy or achieve a certain attestation is not directly tied to the revenue and growth impact it has on the business. This tie-in is extremely powerful because that immediately enables you to have a conversation around budgets, which ultimately security and GRC teams struggle with. I had somebody tell me, if I can point out how many times I've been asked for a recent pen test, I can easily justify the budget for getting a pen test quickly, right? So, John, I'd love to hear from you. Like, I've heard a lot of teams like struggle with figuring out how to tie those two things together to be able to ask for budgets or to justify spend and so on. Is that something that you've thought about?
Yeah, it actually comes up all the time. PCI is a big one, right? Like how do we manage the current business and then manage the requests for GDPR and HIPAA and PCI, and by going through these questionnaires and picking out the questions and then tying them back to a deal saying, hey, we can't do this because there's no PCI or GDPR. It's easier for us to go back to the sales team and say, hey, we answered these questions no because we don't have them. Now let's figure out where we get the budget to implement this kind of control set. So it definitely gives us an edge in being able to track those type of questions. So
yeah, that's and Richard, going back to you on the question you asked, one of the things that we are trying to figure out is how best can we use AI to understand what is being asked repeatedly, and therefore what are the recommendations to make you better to close more deals in your pipeline. So in a future world, I'd love to be in a position where we can analyze a pipeline and say, here is what these companies are likely to ask, and here is what will put you in the best position to be able to answer those questions.
That would make the sales team and the security team pretty happy, like being in the forefront rather than waiting for those dreaded questionnaire to come towards the end of the sales cycle. Now we are being so proactive about it and actively managing it. So those are good. Coming up next, I think I'll open the floor to some questions from the folks as well. And then I think the next on our team is to just give you a quick walkthrough of the platform pretty quickly to show some of these things in action, and I can hit each of these points as well.
Yeah. Yes, we had one question come in. How do you track the accuracy of your answers?
Yeah, so I mentioned this
Awesome.
a little bit. Sorry, Richard, you want to take a first step?
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So really, I think it boils down to two things. I think the first thing is when you're being presented with answers or when you're giving answers to customers, do you have citations that tell you where that answer came from? Particularly if you're using some kind of generative algorithm, being able to have that cite to you the source that it generated the answer from is a good way to have confidence that the answer came from a reality-based source. And then there's the other half of that accuracy is what happens post-facto. Once I've answered, is there a way I can track all of the things I've represented to my customers against what I'm doing internally? So for example, if I'm saying something to a question about encryption and saying we use 256-bit algorithms to encrypt, is there a way I can actually track that I have said that 3 months ago and be able to have confidence that we're still keeping that commitment? And so the other half of accuracy is how do you track your customer and contractual commitments? So what we've built into Trust Cloud is the ability for you to track those commitments and be able to report on how well you're keeping them.
Great. Yeah. Another question that came through is how can you ensure hallucination-free answers with generative AI?
Richard, you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, hallucination free, it has to be on your sources, right? So that's the biggest difference between generative AI working outside versus where we are leveraging our AI to be on your sources of data. And we call it your trust objects in the terms of all of the answers coming from your programs. And when I say program, it's constituents of your policies, your controls, your white paper, your documentation. And all of those data set is used to respond to your incoming security questionnaires rather than the glamorous way ChatGPT can crowdsource that answer for you. Our AI just is sourced on those trust objects. And to Tejas's point, as long as I can give you those citations and say that this answer was a combination of this control and this knowledge base and this policy document, that provides you higher assurance on the accuracy of the answer. And that also shows you what were the different kind of sources used. So it's highly hallucination proof.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so we'll move
And
forward.
actually, yeah, I mean, to that question, like that's my kind of answer. John, since you are using this, has this been consistent with your experience using the product as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to, I think Melissa said it earlier, is, use a SIG as a core for your knowledge base, and then, just spot check and validate answers on the way out the door before just saying, hey, AI answered everything, let's get it out. It was quick, it was easy. So there is some manual validation that's required, but it's still a quicker process. So yeah, I still think in this world of AI, we have to manually check that stuff every once in a while, right?
Yep.
And it gives us our accuracy.
Yeah, for sure. I think with this, Aaron, is this a good time for us to segue into a quick demo? And I know Tejas is leading the demo for us today, so thank you.
Yeah.
Tejas.
So for the screen sharing.
Yeah.
All right, can you see my screen? I always need to get confirmation before I start talking to my screen. Okay, great. So I'll do this relatively quickly, but I'd love to touch on some of the points that we've all highlighted. So I'm going to start with something that us at Trust Cloud are recommending for all of our customers to be able to show their customers. So what I have first is a trust portal that one of our customers has put up, where they are being transparent and forthcoming with information about their security and privacy program. And John and others have a very similar approach now, where the first line of defense for companies like Cribble and Sneak and others is to send people to self-serve themselves on all of this information on their trust portal. We at Trust Cloud have our own trust portal that we use. So Melissa, who's responsible for our GRC practice internally, it's quite common for Melissa to send our customers this trust portal for them to self-serve themselves to all of our internal security and compliance documentation. And we found that on a ballpark, depending on which segment your customers come from, this is often a way to avoid anywhere between a third to a half of the security questionnaires you get. And so this is a great first step. What's also built into this is things like NDA flows and invitation flows, where you can decide who gets to see what and how much they get to see. And also do things like customer virtual audits, where they can see a lot more detailed view of your security and privacy program if they are your top customers. And then the other half that we've been talking a lot about, and I'd love to get John to talk about how they use this, is the security questionnaire AI. And the way that works is we use a combination of inputs to train the AI algorithms on answering security questionnaires for you. So it would be a combination of your compliance certifications, your documents, your policies, your controls, your knowledge bases, other information about your company, and so on. And then what this enables is we've trained AI on 2 dimensions. So we have homegrown models that use NLP and machine learning that we've fine-tuned through hundreds of security questionnaires. And then we also use some third-party generative models on top of them to construct the final answers, and we use a RAG-based method to use both. So as a result of that, what our AI is capable of doing is taking a questionnaire, in this case, something like a cake, and pre-filling anywhere from between 60 to 80% of the questions. And John, I'd love to get your take on how you use Trust Cloud. Where are you seeing success? Where do you see that there's still human involvement? Would love to get your take on it.
Yeah, so we're using it in a similar way here. We have our controls, we have our documents, our ISO statement of applicability, our policies. We're pulling from all of those sources. So I'm getting somewhere, depending on the questionnaire, somewhere between 60 and 70% accuracy, which is pretty good, right? And then again, when it's pre-filled by Trust Cloud, I will spot audit just to make sure I'm in that ballpark of where I need to be. And then we are in the process, like I said earlier, of getting our SIG-Lite completed and uploaded, and that will be our knowledge base. Like, we will just take everything out, and that'll be the knowledge base. If we have to deviate, we can deviate, but yeah, very, very similar process here.
Yeah, that's very consistent with what I've heard from others that I've worked with. But it's great that you're feeding it all of your controls and statement of applicability and all that as well. I think that all goes into being able to automate as much of it as possible.
Mhm.
And then finally, I think the last piece that again goes back to something John mentioned is this idea of trackability, where you can track what you're saying to your customers, as well as the revenue impact of what you're doing in your team towards answering security reviews and questionnaires. And so one thing I've seen a lot of customers succeed with is this ability to create a simple slide at the end of every quarter that showcases the revenue impact of the activities of the GRC team, and using that as part of their reporting. And so two things this enables is, one, to be able to demonstrably show what's the contribution, and the second is to also show where are the gaps that customers are asking about and therefore need budgets and investments. And so that's sort of rounds out the parts that I wanted to show: the trust portal, the AI to answer security questionnaires, and then finally the reporting and tracking around what you have showcased to your customers.
Yeah, just so I use this quite a bit. We have a weekly meeting with leadership just on our team, and I use this quite a bit to show where I'm at and in the sales cycle and in the questionnaire cycle, and what we're working on from a customer perspective, because then it tracks back to their meetings with sales leadership, right? They can go, oh yeah, they talked about that deal, so yeah, you're working on it. So it's a good way to correlate data between teams.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And it's great when the conversation can be about deals and growth, because it makes everyone a participant in helping grow the business.
Yep.
Awesome. I think I know Richa's back, but maybe Aaron, I can hand it back to you.
Yeah.
If there are any other questions, or if you want to do a wrap up.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're just about at the end of the presentation, but if there are any last minute questions, feel free to submit those. One other question that we did have come in is for trust portals, how much detail should you provide in terms of what you put up there, and how do you balance that with putting too much out there and putting enough out there to satisfy customers' curiosity?
Funny that question came up. We've just had that discussion last week. From my perspective, I feel like too much information opens up a can of worms, right? I'm not hiding anything. We're very transparent. We put it all out there. But if somebody wants to see your certificate of insurance and then they start digging into policies, it just delays the sales cycle a little bit. So I've started using the data rooms a little bit and limiting the access to what the users can see. And again, not hiding anything, but to me, it's if someone's looking for a specific document, let them see that specific document rather than opening up everything, because they have a mission, right? If they're looking to see how much cyber insurance we're carrying, there's nothing else to see, right?
Absolutely. Great.
And we get a ton of visits on our trust portal. It's crazy if I pulled up the stats and showed you. So it's actually been a massive benefit for us.
And John, I think that there's also like the difference between like not hiding something and also not putting like sensitive details of your organization out for anyone to, you know, obviously you have it locked down private so that you know it's your customer, but there are still like sensitive pieces of information about your company that should not be, you know, even shared to your partner that's like sensitive internal data. So it's like being transparent with everything that you can, while also safeguarding your own company so that nothing can be exploited.
100%.
Yeah, and just a plug for the trust portal, Cribble, trust.cribble.io. I've been a visitor myself, and it's great. It's great that you're being able to showcase all of this and being transparent to build trust with your customers.
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, that's all the questions that we received. That's we're just about at time. So wanted to give a huge thank you to our panel. John, thank you very much for joining us. Melissa, Tejas, Richa, thank you for participating as well. We want to thank everybody else for joining. We hope this was useful for you and you learned a thing or two. We will be sending a follow-up email with a recording of the session and a copy of the slide deck, along with some additional resources. And so look out for that. And otherwise, thank you all very much and have a great afternoon.